U.S. President Donald Trump lashes out at reports that the special counsel probe on Russia has broadened to include possible obstruction of justice charges. Ministers of Kenya's People's Parliament convene to discuss the country's elections. And cutting-edge tech and hot games at the Electronic Entertainment Expo in Los Angeles. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. Now, after Thursday's tweet storm assailing reports that Special Counsel Robert Mueller is investigating obstruction of justice allegations against him, President Donald Trump took to Twitter again on Friday. He continued to denounce ongoing congressional investigations into his campaign and Russia and reiterated his disdain for the news media. But so far, Republicans in Congress appear to be sticking with the president. Here's VOA's national correspondent Jim Malone.
At the White House, President Donald Trump sent along good wishes to Congressman Steve Scalise, one of several people wounded in an ambush on a Republican baseball practice the previous day.
We got a lot of hearts in this country, great hearts, and they're all sending their love and support to the Scalise family.
But the president had a far different tone on Twitter, lashing out at reports that the Russia investigation has been broadened to include the possibility that he engaged in obstruction of justice. Trump slammed the probe as the single greatest witch hunt in American political history. The president has been on the defensive over the Russia probe for weeks now and often looks to his political base for support.
We're under siege. You understand that. But we will come out bigger and better and stronger than ever. You watch.
Democrats continue to press the administration on Russia, among them Maryland Congressman Elijah Cummings.
This is about the fight for the soul of our democracy. We cannot afford to lose this one.
For the most part, Republicans are sticking with the president, despite some Twitter outbursts that may hurt his own cause, says House Speaker Paul Ryan.
President's new at this. He's new to government, and so he probably wasn't steeped in the long-running protocols that establish the relationships between DOJ, FBI, and White Houses. He's just new to this.
Some moderate Republicans worry that the president's tweets and attacks on the investigation are counterproductive, including Pennsylvania Congressman Charlie Dent.
Every time there's a revelation, there's a Twitter storm, and I think they have to be much more disciplined in how they respond to every news flash on the Russia matter.
Even if the investigation puts the president in legal jeopardy, it would likely be dealt with through the political process known as impeachment. But Republicans hold majorities in both the House and Senate, making impeachment unlikely at the moment, says political expert Chris Adelson.
Even though Trump's approval ratings are very low, and he's losing support even among Republicans, even in his base, I think until Republicans in Congress see some reason to break with him, it's hard to see any problems for him.
President Trump is no stranger to fighting his own battles. But for the moment, Republicans in Congress seem to have his back. Jim Malone, VOA News, Washington.
Well, 2017 was described as the year that right-wing populists would take charge in Europe, echoing the election of Donald Trump in the United States. But it has not played out like that at the polls. Centrist Emmanuel Macron scored a crushing victory in France, and the far-right UK Independence Party is all but wiped out in Britain as the ruling Conservatives lost their majority. Henry Ridgwell reports.
British Prime Minister Theresa May was the first foreign leader to visit President Trump at the White House in January, but that may have cost her at the polls. Britain suffered a series of terror attacks before its recent election. Initially, Donald Trump offered the United States support, but later used Twitter to criticise the Mayor of London. That led many voters to question Britain's coziness with Trump.
And that does push the dial more towards Europe. It's not a tangible thing, but you just get a sense of the national debate swinging back around a little bit, becoming more wary of America again.
In April, President Trump appeared to endorse the far-right candidate Marine Le Pen after the terrorist shooting of a policeman in Paris. She was crushed by her rival, Emmanuel Macron.
It did play a role in the sense that it hindered her chances because of the example that Donald Trump was setting in the United States, which was not necessarily perceived as positive.
Trump's decision to pull out of the Paris Climate Agreement also alarmed Europe.
And I think many voters are now kind of realizing and asking themselves, would voting for anti-establishment, right-wing kind of candidates in Europe do them any good? I don't think this is the end of right-wing populism. I do think that they're not necessarily the only mobilizers of anti-establishment sentiment, and they've just find themselves in competition.
In competition with a new political breed, populist yet centrist. But not all Europe is converted. Trump remains popular in the East, in countries like Poland. The president will visit Warsaw next month. No visits are planned for Paris or Berlin, and his proposed state visit to London is on hold. Analysts say it is a mark of the growing divide between Washington and Western Europe. Henry Ridgwell for VOA News, London.
On to East Africa now. Campaigning is underway in Kenya for the much-anticipated August elections. For a preview of the top issues, VOA Jill Craig visited the People's Parliament in Nairobi.
They may not be making the laws, but they certainly have an opinion about them. Here in Nairobi, the Bunge la Wazalendo, also known as the People's Parliament, meets throughout the day to discuss important issues, and of course, the upcoming August elections.
Actually, we talk about the high cost of living, and we also talk about our top leadership. Yeah, we discuss almost everything around this area.
You cannot get water if you want to get water. You cannot get the ambulance for you to be in the hospital. You cannot get free health care. You cannot get food.
Corruption is another primary issue for Kenyans, which is why voters like Margaret Nganyi will be voting for the opposition candidate Raila Odinga instead of the current president.
We are going to vote this man out because he's a thief. He has stole from us. He's just taking us for a ride. He's not taking care of us, and we are taxpayers.
Others support President Uhuru Kenyatta, often citing his infrastructure projects as proof of success.
He has done a good job, and still have a very long journey to do to take Kenyans to the final part of the journey.
Still, other voters remain skeptical that either the ruling party or the opposition will bring positive change to the country.
For now, it's just a matter of saying which one is a better devil.
But there is one thing that most Kenyans seem to agree upon.
By the way, politics is everything, because when you look at what is going on in this country, the most contributor of what is going on in this country is politics.
Kenya's elections are slated for August 8th, and the members of this People's Parliament will be watching closely. Jill Craig, VOA News, Nairobi.
But one of the major threats to food and water security in Africa is in its soil. Sub-Saharan Africa, where many people depend on agriculture, is experiencing the most severe land degradation in the world. Land degradation is hampering economic development and costing African farmers billions of dollars every year in lost yields and income. Climate change is accelerating the problem. Africa 54's Haiti Adams Fitzpatrick spoke to Ephraim Konya. He's a senior research fellow at the International Food Policy Research Institute, about the need for greater investment in land and soil management and why it should be a global priority.
There is a natural land degradation. For example, if there's steep slope, soil erosion is going to happen when rain falls. And whether there was a human being there or not, land degradation is going to happen. But the biggest problem is human activities. The type of land management that we do, cutting forests and all those things, can lead to land degradation that we know. We did a study which was a global study. We saw that Sub-Saharan Africa contributes about 25% of the area which is degraded, and even the cost of land degradation. Land degradation is a global problem, but its severity is highest in Sub-Saharan Africa.
Is land degradation a cause of the problems that we are seeing in Africa, or is it a symptom of the problems?
Currently, we are seeing hunger is a very big problem. And of course, land, when the land is degraded, the yield, the production that we get from the land goes down. So when there is hunger, there are other problems which come, including civil wars and all that. You can see that there is migration currently to people from Africa going to Europe. They are running away from a problem, and that's land degradation. Poverty also can cause land degradation. So it is a cyclical thing, but it starts with us first, degrading the land, and when we degrade it, we become poorer, and when we are poor, we are not able to get to take care of the land.
Can you explain for us in very simple terms how land degradation impacts economies, communities, and households?
If land is degraded, you see that there are other effects in terms of the economy of the people, but at the same time, we see that the people themselves, the type of land management that they do also causes that land degradation to happen. And people will not be able to manage their land well. They cannot buy fertilizer, they cannot have enough food for their kids, and all those things will lead to land degradation.
You're calling for greater investment in this area. Where do you think those resources and investments should go right now?
If you restore the degraded land, the returns to such investment, you get $5 for each US dollar you use for the restoration of degraded land. The problem that we have in sub-Saharan Africa is that we use only 5% of our budget on agriculture. But agriculture at the same time contributes about 25% of the GDP. We are really starving the cow that produces milk for us. There are many countries in Africa which are subsidizing fertilizer. We are actually proposing that subsidy to be a payment for ecosystem services. When I plant down the forest, I need to be paid back because my forest is going to be absorbing the carbon that have been emitted somewhere else, and that I need to be rewarded for that. The African farmers, they have very big problem of getting to produce and market their goods because the cost of transportation is the highest in the world. And that's something which the government only can be able to invest in improvement of road infrastructure and other marketing services that are required for farmers to be connected to the market. And once they get connected to the market, their land management is going to be better, restoration of land is going to be okay, and that's something which is very important.
Very timely, and tomorrow, Saturday, is the day for fighting against desertification worldwide. Well, I want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we covered. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our show live on Facebook, so check us out and share our show with your friends or so. And check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince Macquarie. Coming up, U.S. Congress explores potential solutions for food insecurity on the continent. Stay with us.
This is BizBeat.
Despite being cut off from the West, Iran's economy is filled with millennials eager to contribute to the country's bottom line. Tech startups like Bamilo, an online shopping network like Amazon, is one example. Hossein Entakabi is the company's chief operating officer.
You know, you always read about the Amazons and how they started from scratch, and you feel that right away here.
The company employs 350 people, mostly in their 20s, and online shopping in Iran is up 34% from last year. Another company, Snap, is another rider app service that now has more than 100,000 drivers. CEO Shahram Shakar.
Our vision is to make it so convenient and so affordable that people will no longer have an incentive to own a personal vehicle.
International sanctions on Iran has given tech startups an advantage to get started and to prosper. For VOA's BizBeat, I'm Philip Alexio.
I wanted to present music and a side of American culture that is most important to me, that is a part of who I am. They're going to get some incredible performances. That's one of the things I love, bringing these artists in so you can get to see them do what they do. It's soul music, and that's what music is. It's that which comes from the soul.
Well, Well, the U.S. House Subcommittee on Africa, Global Health, Global Human Rights and International Organizations held a hearing Thursday on Africa's current and potential famines and how similar crises could be prevented in the future. VOA digital journalist Salim Solomon was there and now joins me to tell us more about it. Salim, welcome to Africa 54.
Thanks for having me.
Now, we hear of these hearings all the time. We just wanted to share with us what came out as different, as kind of standing out of this hearing.
So the key takeaway from yesterday's hearing on Africa's preventing famine in Africa is that in May, the U.S. passed $1 billion for famine relief and to the omnibus appropriation bill led by Congresswoman Karen Bass and Congressman Chris Smith. This is a significant move. It was praised by a lot of Congress people there, but you know, proposed budget cuts are very uncertain. You can feel the mood in Congress and a lot of humanitarian organizations. 3 witnesses talked about how you know these the money gets to the people who need it most. At the moment, we are seeing this is a food crisis since World War II, the worst food crisis since World War II. 3 main countries have been affected: northeastern Nigeria, Somalia, and South Sudan. Famine has been declared. And so, you know, how does this money get to the hands of the people who need it most at the moment?
And that is the issue, because the U.S., of course, is known, and many are grateful that it's the biggest contributor, especially to this kind of aid. The issue is, are there proposals to give more money, or is it just more about making sure that money reaches those who need? That's the problem.
And also the 2018, from this administration, the 2018 budget cuts also paint a grim picture for you know, the USAID, which is the U.S. development agency that facilitates these, you know, how the money gets to the people who need it most. And so 31% is proposed to consolidate with the State Department. But from what I talked to, you know, Congressman Smith said, you know, this is just a blueprint. You know, it's just overblown. It goes through a lot of, you know, checks and balances, and Congress makes sure that it passes.
But still, there are thoughts like, even with the cuts, if the available funds can be channeled effectively, they can do the job, as opposed to just, you know, throwing money out there that doesn't help anybody.
That's one aspect of it. And aside from funding, you know, what's happening on the ground is there's a lot of obstacles even humanitarian organizations are undergoing. In fact, one of the witnesses, the testimonies that was there from humanitarian organizations' perspective is that countries that are affected by the drought, like Ethiopia, the Horn of Africa, there's a lot of problem when you speak out, he said, as, you know, humanitarian people. When they speak out, you know, they get retaliation from governments sometimes. You know, visa is not issued, movement is not allowed to cover these issues. And so the people suffer. And conflict, of course, is the major reason why.
Yeah, we know what's happening in South Sudan especially, and the denial party just drives me nuts.
That's
we
right.
hope for the best. Thanks a lot for sharing this with us. Well, that is VOA digital journalist Salim Solomon. Now, from the President of Mozambique to the U.S. Secretary of Commerce, a greater American economic engagement in Africa is the dominant theme of this year's business summit organized by the Corporate Council on Africa. Here's VOA's correspondent Mariam Diallo.
The African continent is a large and dynamic part of the world where most of the recent growth comes from non-oil and non-commodity dependent economies, and the U.S. must not ignore it, said Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross in his address to the U.S.-Africa Business Summit.
This year, 6 African nations will be among the top 10 fastest growing countries in the world.
Cote d'Ivoire grew at 8.2%. Ethiopia grew at 8%. Tanzania grew at roughly 7.2%. Rwanda and Kenya grew at 6%. Senegal grew at 6.7%.
But as a former global investor, Ross says it's important to make sure that U.S. companies are in the best position possible to do business in Africa.
Access to markets recognition of truly international standards, due process in procurement, protection of intellectual property. These are factors that help foster mutually beneficial relationships.
Lindwe Zulu, South Africa's Minister of Small Business Development, told VOA her country's institutions are very strong.
It's about Africa attracting U.S. investors. And in the main, it's about Africa creating a conducive environment for investors, because there's no investor who wants to go into any country and not see the returns of their investment.
Vista Life Sciences, a U.S. healthcare technology company, recently set up shop in Botswana, where the company is developing new pathways for HIV testing and cervical cancer management.
We worked with the local government. They were fantastic. We engaged local attorneys to help guide our path and all of the local regulatory issues.
For the president of Mozambique, relationships should be based on a partnership.
If you give me the fish, I'm going to eat today and the next day. But if you give the fishing gear, I will learn how to fish and eventually fish for myself and even for you one day.
It's that kind of self-sufficiency that African nations are seeking.
We don't want to encourage asking for aid and then going for loans and all that. We want to process our own produce, add value to it, be able to earn, to undertake our own infrastructure.
Mariama Diallo, VOA News, Washington.
Well, I understand now. For a short break, still to come on Africa 54, the most buzzed about games and tech at the Electronic Entertainment Expo in Los Angeles. We'll be right back.
If you've just joined us, I'm Mariama Diallo, and here is a quick recap of today's headlines.
Condition of the migrants in Libya, generally speaking, are particularly difficult.
In Belgium, the International Organization for Migration says the European Union must do more to help protect migrants stranded in Libya. In Senegal, French Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian visits the country to discuss climate, economic development, and security. In Chad, university lecturers are on strike over pay and working conditions, claiming they are owed over 7 months in back pay. Finally, in South Africa, former show jumper Enos Mafokati teaches children horse gymnastics in Soweto. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Welcome back to Africa 54, and here is what's trending. At the Electronic Entertainment Expo in Los Angeles, attendees are being wowed by multi-view screens and smart motion capture technology. These gamers are playing a multiplayer match with a difference. Rather than using individual screens or staring at a small section of just one display, they're using Miravit's multi-view screen. It's a display that enables multiple people to simultaneously view completely different content on just one screen. As the video games industry slowly embraces virtual reality, other technologies are being developed to allow people to interact with the virtual space. This device uses ultrasound to allow users to touch virtual objects in midair. Well, next up, it's all about the games for Sony PlayStation at the Electronic Entertainment Expo in Los Angeles. Sony showed off a new addition to the popular Call of Duty franchise named Call of Duty WW2. This new entry from game publisher Activision steps back in time after last year's sci-fi installment, Infinite Warfare. Gamers play as a soldier who is part of the 1st Infantry Division landing in Normandy on D-Day. Sony's audience was also treated to an 8-minute trailer of its new Spider-Man game, which is expected to launch next year. The new web-slinging title is an exclusive to Sony PlayStation. Well, and finally, hardcore violence in a fictional Montana town, religious imagery, and guns. The game has already generated plenty of controversy, with some suggesting the game resonates with the values of the American alt-right. Far Cry 5 sees a religious leader known as the Father commanding a cult of devotees that engage in violence to satisfy him. A team of characters battle the cult members using an array of weapons and vehicles. All have different specialties and they all enjoy enthusiastically killing off their targets. And that is what's trending today. Well, Democratic and Republican lawmakers held their annual congressional baseball game in a show of unity one day after a gunman who had posted anti-Trump messages opened fire on Republicans practicing for the charity event. VOA congressional reporter Catherine Gibson has more.
A pause from politics for one night. The divisions between Democrats and Republicans forgotten on the baseball field as a friendly rivalry became a tribute to Representative Steve Scalise, wounded along with 4 others just hours before the game.
Steve Scalise, this hat's for you.
After observing a moment of silence, Scalise's Democratic counterpart said the game sent a clear message.
I think what you see is a determination that a violent act is not going to dissuade us or people from continuing with their lives.
A heavy security presence didn't stop fans from filling the stands, setting record numbers in a show of support for the lawmakers they work alongside.
We're a big family up on the Hill at the end of the day, despite all our arguments and disagreements.
And with many wearing the purple and gold of Scalise's home state team.
It was nice for everybody to come together today, you know? Good people. Hopefully the good will outweigh the bad. It's just been a lot of bad lately.
Despite often contentious political debate, the decades-old Washington tradition has always brought Capitol Hill lawmakers together.
You got a bunch of middle-aged guys and gals out there trying as best they can, and it's a really spirited competition.
And while the game gave many opportunities for hope, Sanford wondered if the shooting would be a turning point.
For us to be a civil society, an open society, we have to be able to engage vehemently with each other. Say, I 100% disagree with you, but not hate the person.
A summer tradition that couldn't be stopped, giving every person in this park a moment of unity to remember as the country moves forward. Catherine Gibson, VOA News, Nationals Park.
Thanks, Catherine. And that's our show for today. Now be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com for more news. Tune in to VOA's evening radio show Africa News Tonight at 1800 UTC. And in the mornings today, Break Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC, Monday through Friday. Thanks a lot for watching from all of us in Washington. Have a good night.
Welcome to English in a Minute. A plate is a dish that you put your food on.
Have a lot on your plate.
Hey Anna, I'm having a party this weekend. You should come.
I wish I could, but my weekend is really busy. I'm baking a wedding cake, writing my article, teaching 2 classes, and oh, my parents are visiting.
Wow, you have a lot